I've always loved the woods. The silence, the way the trees seemed endless, the smell of pine in the air, it always made me feel free. But after what happened in Black Hollow, I don't see forests the same way anymore. When I first arrived in Black Hollow, I thought I had found paradise. The cabin was old but cozy. A wood stove, creaky floors, the smell of pine resin drifting in through the cracked windows. The landlord barely said a word when I signed the lease, just handed me the keys and told me, "Keep your nights short, don't wander after dark." I laughed it off at the time. Later, those words would replay in my head like a curse. The cabin sat deep in the woods, no neighbors, no paved roads, just endless trees. The first few days were quiet. I'd take long walks, chop wood, read by candlelight when the power flickered. It felt like stepping into another world, but Black Hollow didn't stay quiet for long. On my fourth night, I heard it. I was lying in bed when I caught the faint sound of footsteps crunching leaves outside my window. Not animals. These were deliberate, slow, packing back and forth, circling the cabin. I held my breath, waiting for the noise to stop. But it didn't. Whoever or whatever, it was stayed out there until the sky began to pale with morning. When I opened the door the next day, I froze. The dirt around the cabin was covered in bare footprints. They weren't mine. Some were large, others small, almost childlike, and they didn't lead in or out of the woods. They just circled the cabin, over and over. Each night after, it got worse. Sometimes it was scratching on the walls, like nails dragging against the wood. Other nights I'd hear knocks, 3 knocks, always 3 on different sides of the cabin. One evening I found a pile of objects stacked neatly on my porch, a broken pocket watch, a small bird skull, and a strand of hair tied into a knot. I didn't touch them, but when I came back later they were gone. And then came the whispers. They floated from the tree line, low and faint, like dozens of voices murmuring all at once. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew they were saying my name. It was almost midnight when I snapped. I grabbed my flashlight and stormed into the woods, yelling into the dark, demanding whoever was out there to show themselves. At first, silence, then a reply, a whistle, low, mocking. I swung the light and caught a glimpse of something tall and pale slipping behind the trees. Its limbs were impossibly long, its movements jerky, like a puppet on strings. I ran after it. My light flickered, branches whipped my face, the ground grew soft like mud, and then I stumbled into a clearing. The circle of trees stood unnaturally even, as if cut by hand. In the center sat a wooden chair. Around it, piles of bones, some animal, some unmistakably human. Before I could move, I felt eyes on me. I lifted the flashlight. Dozens of figures stood at the edge of the clearing, tall, pale, still, their faces blank, their eyes catching the beam like glass. They didn't move, they just watched. And then every single one of them tilted their head at the same time. That broke me. I ran harder than I've ever run in my life. The whispers chased me, the footsteps thundered behind me, and when I finally reached the cabin, I slammed the door and didn't sleep a second that night. After that, I tried to ignore it, pretend it wasn't real, but the woods didn't let me. The next morning, there was something nailed to my door. A dead crow, wings spread wide, its eyes missing. Beneath it, carved deep into the wood, "You belong to the woods." I wanted to leave, I really did, but the nearest town was hours away, and something in me, stupid curiosity, maybe kept me there, and that's when the dreams began. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, convinced I was still outside. In the dreams, I was always back in the clearing, sitting in that wooden chair, while the pale figures closed in around me. Their whispers weren't whispers anymore. They were clear. They were chanting, over and over, "Stay, stay, stay." The worst part, sometimes I'd wake up standing at my cabin door, hand on the latch, as if I'd been sleepwalking straight toward the forest. It all came to a head on my last night. The knocking started at 11 p.m., 3 knocks, then silence. A minute later, another 3 knocks, but this time they came from inside the cabin. I froze, my flashlight beam shook as I turned toward the sound. The closet door, something was inside, scratching, pushing against the wood. I staggered back, my chest tight, as the door creaked open. But it wasn't empty. A pale hand slid out, then a face, that same long, hollow face I'd seen in the woods, grinning at me with teeth too many for its mouth. I bolted out the front door into the trees, not caring where I went. The whispers rose like a storm, the figures emerged from the dark, their pale bodies weaving between the trunks. I don't know how long I ran. My lungs burned, my legs gave out, and I collapsed at the edge of the clearing. The chair stood waiting. And behind me, dozens of them, watching, whispering, closing in. I don't remember how I made it back. All I know is that when the sun rose, I was lying on my cabin floor, dirt under my nails, blood on my feet. I packed before the clock struck noon. I never looked back. It's been months since I left Black Hollow, but the forest never really left me. Sometimes I find footprints outside my new apartment, bare, circling. Sometimes at night I hear the knocking again. And sometimes when I dream I'm back in that chair, surrounded. The whisper's always the same. You belong to the woods.